Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's get straight down to the big story that we're tracking. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a historic two-day visit to Poland, which will be followed by an important day-long visit to Ukraine. This marks the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Poland in 45 years, with the last visit made by Prime Minister Morarji Desai back in 1979. Prime Minister Modi will be the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine since diplomatic ties were established between the two countries in 1992. Now, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Poland is particularly significant as it coincides with the 70th anniversary of India's diplomatic relations with that country. According to the Ministry of External Affairs, there are an estimated 25,000 Indians living in Poland, including around 5,000 students. Ahead of his visit, Mr. Modi issued a departure statement saying, and I quote, "My visit to Poland comes as we mark 70 years of our diplomatic relations. Poland is a key economic partner in Central Europe. Our mutual commitment to democracy and pluralism further reinforces our relationship. I look forward to meeting my friend Prime Minister Donald Tusk and President Andrzej Duda to further advance our partnership." Among his engagements in Warsaw, the Prime Minister will address members of the Indian diaspora in that country. Before leaving, the Prime Minister also talked about the Ukraine visit, saying, "From Poland, I will be visiting Ukraine at the invitation of President Volodymyr Zelensky. This is the first ever visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Ukraine. I look forward to the opportunity to build upon earlier conversations with President Zelensky on strengthening bilateral cooperation and shared perspectives on a peaceful resolution of the ongoing Ukraine conflict. As a friend and partner, we hope for an early return of peace and stability in the region." Prime Minister Modi is in Warsaw, where he will visit memorials that commemorate the special episodes of Jamnagar and Kolhapur in the shared history of India and Poland. India and Poland are not just united in their ideological stance against colonialism, imperialism and racism, but also share deep historical ties. The long-standing friendly relations between the two nations date back to the 1940s. The Prime Minister's visit to war memorials in Warsaw is being seen as a reflection of these strong historical ties. The Prime Minister is going to honor the bravery of the Indian soldiers who fought alongside Polish and Allied forces in the Battle of Monte Cassino during World War II. Let's take a closer look at the historic Battle of Monte Cassino, which brought the two nations together. During the Second World War, the Maharajas of Jamnagar and Kolhapur provided shelter to thousands of Polish refugees. This battle was a crucial part of the Allied campaign leading to the liberation of Rome. In the 1940s, Jam Sahib Digvijay of Navanagar, now known as Jamnagar in Gujarat, accepted over 1,000 Polish refugees, mostly children, escaping the war. Jam Sahib, who is referred to as the Good Maharaja in Poland, had provided refuge in his kingdom at a place called Balachadi. Similarly, a Polish camp was set up in Valivad in the Kolhapur Presidency, now in Maharashtra, ruled by Bhosle Chhatrapati during World War II. The memorial pillar located in Valivad, in memory of over 5,000 Polish refugees who escaped to India during World War II. This is where they took shelter. When Poland was caught between Adolf Hitler's Germany and Joseph Stalin's Russia during the Second World War, a stream of refugees had made their way to Valivad village in the Kolhapur district. Today, Poland is an important fulcrum of Indian trade and investment in the Central European region. It is currently the sixth largest economy in the European Union and will hold the next presidency of the Council of the European Union. The India-Poland bilateral trade is currently pegged at $6 billion, which makes Poland India's largest trading partner in Central and Eastern Europe. Indian investments in Poland are estimated at around $3 billion, while Polish investments in India are around $1 billion. Marking the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations with Poland, the visit seeks to increase Indian presence in a key European economy that is positioning itself as a low-cost manufacturing and logistics hub on the continent. The talks are expected to include greater defense cooperation and bilateral business ties in information technology, pharmaceutical and automobile manufacturing. Poland is already home to nearshoring operations of many Indian information technology majors such as Tata Consultancy Services, HCL, Tech, Infosys and Wipro. Manufacturing units of pharmaceutical company Ranbaxy, Berger Paints and automotive and equipment manufacturer Escorts, amongst others, have also emerged in the past decade. Officials say Poland is keen to attract more Indian investments and has pitched itself as a technology-driven and cost-effective manufacturing destination in Europe. In February this year, Indian telecommunications gear maker HFCL announced plans to set up a fiber optic cable plant in Poland. Foreign direct investment from Poland is the 34th largest amongst nations at $712 million. Nearly 30 Polish companies have a business presence in India. India has a positive trade balance with Poland, bolstered by a diversified export basket. The number of Indian nationals in Poland has increased to 25,000. This includes 5,000 students, many of whom chose to study in Poland after being evacuated from neighboring Ukraine in 2022 after the war erupted. In fact, India's Ministry of External Affairs, on the eve of Prime Minister Modi's departure, referred to the presence of a large Indian community in Poland, saying, and I quote, "You may recall that the government and people of Poland had offered valuable assistance during Operation Ganga for the evacuation of Indian students from Ukraine. More than 4,000 Indian students were evacuated via Poland in 2022. Poland has also long been a center of Indology, with Sanskrit being studied at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow since 1860. During this visit, Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to engage with scholars and students, further promoting cultural and academic exchanges between India and Poland. The University of Warsaw, home to the largest Indology department in Central Europe, continues to be a hub for Indian studies. This visit is significant for multiple reasons, not just historical, cultural and economic ties. It represents India's deepening engagement with Eastern Europe, a region that has become increasingly important due to the Ukraine crisis. Poland's geographical proximity to Ukraine and its role in supporting Ukrainian refugees and military efforts have made it a crucial ally for many Western nations. By visiting Poland, Prime Minister Modi is acknowledging the country's strategic importance and seeking to bolster bilateral ties. The visit is also a clear indication of India's intent to diversify its relationships in Europe. While traditionally focused on Western European nations like France and Germany, India is now looking eastward, recognizing the growing influence of countries like Poland in European politics. This shift is part of a broader strategy to enhance India's presence in the European Union, particularly in areas like defense cooperation, trade and energy security. India and Poland have a long history of cooperation, particularly in the defense sector. Poland has been a key supplier of military equipment to India, and both countries have collaborated on various defense technology projects. Mr. Modi's visit is expected to further deepen this cooperation, with discussions likely to focus on expanding joint ventures, technology transfers and enhancing defense capabilities. With the conflict in Ukraine disrupting energy supplies across Europe, India and Poland are likely to explore ways to enhance cooperation in this sector, particularly in the development of renewable energy sources and the diversification of energy imports. Also, let's not forget, India's approach to the Ukraine conflict has been characterized by a delicate balancing act. While maintaining its historical ties with Russia, India has also engaged with Ukraine and Western nations and repeatedly called for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. In this context, Poland's role as a key NATO member and a frontline state makes it an essential partner for India as well. This visit to Poland is an opportunity to reinforce India's position on the Ukraine conflict. By engaging with the Polish leadership, Prime Minister Modi is likely to emphasize the need for continued dialogue and diplomacy, aligning with India's broader foreign policy objectives. This visit also serves as a platform for India to express its support for Poland's efforts in managing the humanitarian crisis resulting from the conflict. At a press conference, the Ministry of External Affairs said, and I quote, "Poland has emerged as a key partner for India in Europe, particularly in the context of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine." Prime Minister Modi's visit to Poland will focus on strengthening our bilateral ties with a particular emphasis on defense cooperation, trade and energy security. India recognizes the critical role that Poland has played in supporting Ukraine during the conflict. We are committed to working with Poland to ensure that the humanitarian needs of the Ukrainian people are met.
Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, has arrived in Warsaw. This visit is special because it happens to be the 70th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between Poland and India. This visit is also historic because the visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Poland is happening after 45 years. He will shortly be visiting 3 memorials, paying tribute at the Good Maharaja Memorial, at the Monte Cassino Memorial and at the Kolhapur Memorial. The history behind these memorials connects Poland and India in a very special way. The people of India and Poland in a very special way. Tomorrow, of course, he has bilateral meetings with the Prime Minister of Poland, His Excellency Mr. Donald Tusk. He also will be meeting the President of Poland, President Duda, and thereafter he will meet business leaders from Poland to strengthen India-Poland business relations. Prime Minister will also be meeting indologists and some kabaddi players to see what is there that attracts India and Poland at the people-to-people level together. For more on the visit, stay tuned, stay connected with us. Thank you.
Yes, in fact, we're really happy about the visit of Indian Prime Minister to Poland. This is first visit of the Indian Prime Minister to our country since 1979. So if you ask me about the importance, I would say that's very important, very significant, bahut zaruri hai. So we're really looking forward to welcoming Prime Minister Modi in Poland. As you rightly said, we are celebrating the 70th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. And in fact, we will be talking a lot about the common past that we had and relationship that we had in the past, last 70 years, taking stock of these experiences and collaboration, but we will be also looking to the future and wanting to find new avenues of cooperation.
बस उन्होंने ये साइन दिया है, उन्होंने उनकी आंखों में पूरा सच दिख गया है कि वो अपनी माँ को कितना प्यार करते हैं और ये बहुत सारा कुछ पावन हो गया और उन्होंने मेरी राखी भी ले ली है।
उन्होंने राखी भी ले ली इनकी।
बस मुझे बहुत खुशी हुई है, बस वो आए, मैंने वेलकम मोदी ऐसे ही बोला और कुछ नहीं।
तो पहले जैसे आया तो उन्होंने उसके चीक पे प्ले किया, फिर उसे बोला कि क्या नाम है, फिर आशीर्वाद देके गए कि वेरी ब्यूटीफुल, ऐसा कुछ।
बात तो नहीं हो पाई क्योंकि बहुत सारे यहाँ पे उनकी वेट कर रहे थे, बट या आई एम रियली हैप्पी। जो 8 घंटे की मेहनत थी, आई थिंक इट्स कम्प्लीटली hard work pay off, and I'm really happy. Even I'm Gujarati, I didn't meet him that much closer than now. So I'm really happy that, I get the autograph from him and I see him that much close.
It's a proud moment for our community to have met Mr. Narendra Modi, our Prime Minister of India. We are blessed and looking forward to some more meetings like this.
I think Modi ji brings a certain calm and peace with him. He completes the Indian diaspora outside, so the family is complete with him coming and visiting us. We are very proud and we are very happy that he came here.
So why is this visit so significant? Of course, it will be followed up with another very important visit, a day-long visit to war-torn Ukraine. We'll discuss that with our panel of experts in a moment after this quick break.
Hey, careful, huh? My daddy got it from abroad. Hey, disaster! How will you pay for the loss now?
In stock market, you should take risk as per your capacity and knowledge. Trade in options very carefully.
Wow, Dikra! Absolutely perfect. Take risk with full understanding. Fast.
My God, isn't she your daughter?
Yes.
She's playing football. This is boys' game. Make her study. If she doesn't get a good job, she will get a good match. Will you win the world by playing football?
Yes, auntie. My daughter will win the world by playing football.
Let's go to Germany.
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
This is News9 Live, India's only digital exclusive live stream. For the early adopters, bringing you the news 24/7. For the smart audiences on the smartest TVs. News9 Live. Stream now on your smart TVs.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we are discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's two-day visit to Poland. He is in fact in the Polish capital Warsaw as we speak. Let's open this up to our panelists. Joining me on Global Lens tonight is Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, former Indian diplomat, Professor Swaran Singh at the Center for International Politics at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, and in a moment we will be joined by Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs Analyst at Eurasia Group. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining me. Professor Swaran Singh, let me begin with you. There are multiple dimensions to this visit, which is being described as a historic one. Not to mention the fact that this is the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Poland in 45 years. But would it be correct to view the significance and relevance of this visit, particularly through the prism of the Ukraine conflict? Given Poland's geographical proximity to the war-torn country, the fact that it has helped Ukraine in its military efforts, it's offered a lot of humanitarian assistance to the escaping refugees. Poland also helped India evacuate many of its stranded citizens, especially students, when the war had just erupted in Ukraine back in 2022. Does being a frontline state in this war make Poland a particularly significant player, not just for its NATO allies, but also for India?
Thank you, Neha. I think clearly in this visit of Prime Minister Modi to Poland and Ukraine, of course, world media's focus clearly is on what India is bringing to the table as far as the Ukraine crisis, which has impacted much of the world for the last 2.5 years. That remains the primary focus, but that doesn't in any case, undermine a very unique and strong relationship that India has with Poland. Your initial remarks brought out that uniqueness beautifully, whether it is from the 16th, 17th centuries or it is more during the Cold War or after the Cold War. You remember Gandhi and Nehru were very vocal critiques of both German invasion and Russian Soviet occupation of Poland. Then, of course, India and Poland became very close friends of Soviet Union. After collapse of Cold War, we were both Poland and India were trying to get closer to Western Europe and United States. So very strong historic relationship here, and important to underline how Poland is the most important key partner of India in economic and defense cooperation in Central Europe. You did mention that from India, most of the time we think of Europe in terms of Western Europe. So in that sense, I think this is an important first stop for Indian Prime Minister to not just reiterate and build forward the bilateral relationship with Poland, but also in that sense get a sense of the ground situation. And of course, Poland was very helpful when India wanted to bring back about 23,000 Indians from the war crisis zone. And of course, Poland was the first country to receive over 1 million refugees. No questions asked from Ukraine, no papers checked, immediately help provided. But it is also interesting to note that lately, just like much of the Western world is facing fatigue, including United States, there is a certain fatigue setting in even in behavior of Poland vis-a-vis Ukraine. Of course, they continue to be strong supporters. And they are the frontline state, as you mentioned, but their own economic interests are getting impacted in that sense. And they have relatively been more cautious lately, which perhaps make it easier for India to now connect with Poland, and through Poland then connect with President Zelensky and his team there in Ukraine when he goes to Kiev. So I think it's a very important first stop for Prime Minister's visit to Kiev, which of course will contribute to both India being in know of the ground situation, reevaluating its cost-benefit analysis as to what exactly India can do value add in terms of the peace processes efforts as far as Ukraine crisis are concerned. But I think we should not overlook at all a very significant bilateral relationship that India shares with Poland, and that I think is going to strengthen India's potential in terms of being an important contributor to peacemaking in Ukraine as well.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive analysis. Thanks for that. Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, Professor Swaran Singh, of course, makes a valid point. The Ukraine conflict apart, India and Poland have had strong historical and cultural ties going back to the 1940s, since the days of World War II, which is why the Prime Minister is also going to visit 3 war memorials in Warsaw. But the question then that needs to be asked is that despite these strong historical, cultural and economic ties, we haven't seen much engagement between the two countries. What took so long for an Indian Prime Minister to finally visit Poland? It's been 45 years.
Well, they have, I of course agree with what the previous speaker said about the history and about the bilateral aspects. But to my mind, I think the most important aspect of these, most important, let's say, importance of this visit is from the signaling point of view. You know, the West, particularly the United States and some countries of Europe and Ukraine, they were not happy with the with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia and the way he was welcomed by President Putin and so on, particularly the timing of the visit when the NATO summit was taking place in Washington. And they felt that India had not been sensitive enough about the timing of its Russia visit. There is certain amount of unhappiness about India's renewed focus on purchase of arms from Russia and so on. So I think this time, by devoting this whole visit to Poland, which is a frontline state in the war on Ukraine, and Ukraine itself, Prime Minister Modi is signaling that we are as much interested in Europe and United States and Ukraine and Eastern Europe as we are in Russia, and therefore India is very mindful of its relationship with these countries. The second aspect is that the Ukraine war is now more or less, Ukraine conflict is more or less ready for a resolution. Both sides are tired. The supply of arms, from the West is becoming difficult to Ukraine. Russians are also tired. Their military might is exhausted. Their industries are exhausted. So it is nearing a resolution, and India can play a very important role in the peaceful negotiations on Ukraine and in the economic reconstruction of Ukraine, which is going to be of paramount importance. So, second aspect on which this visit is focusing is that to convey India's readiness to play a significant role in economic reconstruction of Ukraine. And of course, then we have important bilateral relations, with Ukraine and Poland, which you have just discussed with the previous speaker and you have mentioned in your own introduction. So I don't want to repeat on that. But I think, to my mind, this visit is more important from these angles.
Okay, and as we speak, Ambassador, we're looking at live pictures of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at a war memorial in Warsaw. He is scheduled to visit 3 war memorials to, in a sense, pay his tribute to the rich historical ties that the two countries have had, and to honor those Indian soldiers who actually fought alongside the Polish and Allied forces in World War II. Let me, as we continue to look at these pictures that are coming to us live from the war memorials in Warsaw, let me continue this conversation with Professor Swaran Singh. Professor Singh, even if we argue that India has an independent relationship with Poland that has its own historical, cultural and economic significance, there are many who would insist that, given the timing of this visit, the fact that the Prime Minister is today in Poland and 2 days from now will be in Ukraine, and coming as it does weeks after that very high profile and highly dissected and debated visit to Moscow, where we also saw that hug between Prime Minister Modi and President Vladimir Putin, something that left the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky furious, and there was a lot of commentary on it, critical, if I might add, in the Western press as well. Therefore, looking at the timing of it, many might call it India's balancing act. How do you look at it?
Thank you, Neha, for asking that question to me, because my understanding is slightly at variance from what my esteemed colleague Ambassador Gupta just mentioned. India has seen even the Foreign Minister Lavrov getting extremely angry with India's participation in quadrilateral security framework. So also when Indian Prime Minister was in Moscow, it just coincided with NATO's summit in Washington, D.C. And we saw President Biden, Secretary of State Blinken, of course, their ambassador in New Delhi, making remarks. I think this visit has absolutely, and I'm saying consciously, absolutely nothing to do with how major powers comment on India's behavior. Any great power, when it emerges, will annoy some other countries. You see, so many countries are upset with the United States. I don't think that decides American foreign policy. Likewise, I don't think it is a visit at all driven by any Western angst or anxieties or angers or anything. It's a reflection of India's strategic autonomy, where it is a signal to Russia that India is not bandwagoning Russia or United States. India decides what is in best interest of its own foreign policy, and therefore takes certain steps in where Indian Prime Minister has to go. In fact, India didn't have to wait for the criticism coming from West. The moment the visit to Moscow was announced, among you, several media people were already beginning to speculate, when will Prime Minister now go to Ukraine? You remember that visit to Moscow was preceded by Ukrainian foreign minister being hosted in India. So I think a lot of evaluation and cost-benefit analysis happen in each of these initiatives that Indian Prime Minister takes. And I think in that sense, this is a visit where India wants to take forward its role as a country that has always spoken for peacemaking and peace building around the world. It is just extension of that effort. And that is the language that we heard when Deputy National Security Advisor Pavan Kapoor was recently in Kiev, the Chief of Staff of President Zelensky, and he used the same language that India can make a valuable contribution to the peace processes efforts that are in play right now. That's a broad language. I'm hoping Indian Prime Minister's statement from Kiev will be much more specific and give us a little idea as to where India's contribution is going to be and how India is going to play that role in coming times. I agree with the ambassador about the fatigue on both sides. Both sides may be now looking also for some kind of face saver. And that's a fantastic way of looking at. We have seen peace proposals like 13-point proposal of China being demolished by Western countries, the Swiss Peace Summit being boycotted by China, by Russia. And we have seen that kind of initiatives don't work at all. So it has to be very snail pace, modest, behind the closed doors kind of effort. And I think that is the approach that India is adopting. And hopefully we will see that India's contributions will become a little more clear when Indian Prime Minister speaks from Kiev. And I think that speech is what is awaited around the world. But I think it's an important relationship with Poland as well. So I think we should not overcast the whole visit in terms of only visit to Kiev. You mentioned of Indian Prime Minister visiting and meeting soldiers. That again is a strong relationship. It's not just defense cooperation, exchanges and trainings and courses. They have worked together during both world wars. A lot of these people were together as prisoners of war. They have worked together in UN peacekeeping. So it's a very broad-based spectrum of military to military engagements of India and Poland, which you saw in the early of 2000s, led to enormous strong peace defense cooperation. MOU was signed in 2003. So it's a very broad-based defense and economic cooperation. So all I'm saying is let's keep in mind that it's a visit to Poland, which is a very important bilateral relationship. Kiev will be happening tomorrow, day after.
Yes. All right. A broad spectrum of issues that define this historically significant relationship. But I think we can all agree that Prime Minister Modi's address from Kiev later this week is really pretty much going to be the highlight of this week. But there is no doubt India will want to reiterate its message to Russia and Ukraine and indeed the world that dialogue and diplomacy are the only way forward, and India is on the side of peace as it has maintained since the beginning of this war. All right, we need to take another quick break here on Global Lens, but don't go anywhere. We'll continue this conversation on the other side.
Big fan of Ian Bell, watching him very classy in all formats.
I find Durban quite a challenge, which is still an enjoyable one.
You're not allowed to bowl a bouncer, so that tells you that they want to see runs on the board.
बड़े अच्छे टूर्स किए हैं, बड़ी अच्छी यादें हैं हर जगह की, जहां मैंने पर्सनली क्रिकेट को बहुत एंजॉय किया है. ऑस्ट्रेलिया एंड इंडिया में बहुत ज़्यादा एंजॉय किया.
I love playing again England and India, and they were both very different challenges.
Up close and personal with legendary cricketers like never before. Icons of the pitch.
This and more. Streaming on News9 plus news is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Have not quite lived up to their pre-tournament billing, delivering a series of less than convincing performances. With 2 draws and a solitary win.
Your son will be Messi. No studies, just football all day. Go my son, go. Make my face shine through playing football.
Not only your face, but also the country's. I will conquer the world by playing football. Come, let's go to Germany!
World's largest football talent hunt, News9 Indian Tigers and Tigresses. In association with DFB Pokal, Bundesliga, BVB and India Football Center. Train and play matches in Europe. Register now and fly to Germany. IndianTigersandTigresses.com.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
Joe Biden is not going to be the Democratic presidential nominee.
I made my choice. Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds, predators. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
I am the one saving democracy.
He has tapped into the fear and anxiety about demographic change in the US.
This polarization in the United States. Some people are even suggesting that there could be a civil war.
You are this unable to solve your own domestic problems. You have no right to claim to be anybody else in the world. And we're moving into a multipolar world where the United States will not lead.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the significance of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's historic two-day visit to Poland, which of course will be followed by a day-long visit to Ukraine. Now, this, of course, is the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is visiting Poland in 45 years, despite the strong historical and cultural ties that have existed between the two countries, at least since the 1940s, since the time of the Second World War. What makes this visit particularly significant? We have another guest joining us on Global Lens tonight, Professor Umu Salma Bawa. She teaches at the Center for European Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you very much, Professor Bawa, for joining me on Global Lens tonight. How do you think one should perceive Prime Minister Modi's visit to Poland? We've talked about how historically and culturally the two countries have enjoyed close ties. There is also a very important economic dimension to this relationship, not to mention the fact that India is now perhaps looking eastward as far as Europe is concerned, having thus far focused on Western European nations such as France and Germany. But would it be correct to say, though Professor Swaran Singh doesn't agree, that the real significance of this visit, even to Poland, will have to be seen through the prism of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the fact that Prime Minister Modi will be in Kiev next, the fact that he was in Moscow a few weeks ago, and that of course did raise eyebrows in several parts of the world, not to mention the very furious reaction that it evoked from the Ukrainian president himself. Is this Prime Minister Narendra Modi once again pushing ahead India's message of peace and the fact that we believe that dialogue and diplomacy are the only way forward? How do you look at this visit?
Thank you, Neha, and a good evening to all the viewers. I think, every visit of the Prime Minister is leading the foreign policy forward. And one has to look at multiple aspects, in terms of which is the country the Prime Minister is visiting, what are the historical basis for that bilateral relationship, and then of course look at the larger, the picture, the larger canvas of what else is happening, say in the vicinity or other factors which can influence also the bilateral. So I think it's important to first and foremost, place this visit of Prime Minister Modi to Poland in the context of the bilateral of the 70 years, which itself is significant because it marks a dramatic shift in the political engagement that India and Poland have had over an extended period of time, a time in history where Poland, was part of the socialist bloc, and today, as you celebrate 70 years, Poland is part of, the larger European group, which we call the European Union, and in that sense, part of this larger, 27 group, which endorses democracy, respect for rule of law, and human rights. So in that context, it's a huge, journey in the bilateral relationship, and it's a kind of not only just emphasizing the 70th year, but taking forward that partnership. Now, what I would say is in the larger canvas of the shifting geopolitics that is happening. And your question, which you had multiple parts where you said, the Prime Minister then visits Ukraine. And obviously, the attention of everybody gets diverted to that. But I would, also request, everybody to look at the importance of this visit in the larger context that India at this point is also, negotiating free trade agreement with the European Union, and that's extremely important to be looked at in the larger, context of India's relations with the European Union, but also in terms of India's relations with Poland, which become extremely important as one of the larger countries within the European Union. A second is, what is the message the Prime Minister is carrying? Obviously, it's multiple messages the Prime Minister is taking with him. If one were to look at two keywords which you've just enumerated, dialogue and diplomacy are the hallmarks of Indian foreign policy. I think that goes without saying. So along with the meeting to Poland, recognizing that Poland is an important country, and as India expands its political dialogue with the countries within the European Union on the eastern flank, it goes without saying that geopolitics is casting a long shadow on every relationship in that region. So in that extent, I think this visit also comes in a way of telling that, the language of dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward. And I think that is recognized when you look and see that this war in Ukraine has continued now for more than 2.5 years. Will the battlefield give a decisive reply? I think that has become very evident now that it can continue endlessly and reach a stalemate. There is not only the issue of the fatigue in terms of, militarily, but politically, is it viable to be continuing? And therefore, something has to be found. And I think the Prime Minister's statement when the war broke out, that this is not the age of war, is being reiterated again through the Prime Minister's own visit, I would say.
Okay, interesting indeed, but I think a lot of Indians can be forgiven for not realizing that India has an important relationship with Poland that stands on its own, considering that this is the first time that an Indian Prime Minister is actually visiting that country in 45 years, the last time being Prime Minister Morarji Desai, all the way back in 1979. Perhaps a lot of our viewers weren't even born then. And as we continue to discuss the, bilateral relationship, we're also looking at some fresh images that are coming to us from the war memorials in Warsaw, where Prime Minister Modi is honoring the memory of the brave Indian soldiers who fought alongside the Polish and Allied forces during World War II. This, in a sense, also is a reflection of the importance that Prime Minister Modi and his government attach to the historical ties between the two countries. Let me take some of the points that have been made by Professor Bawa to Ambassador Yogesh Gupta. At this point, Ambassador Gupta, on the eve of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Poland, the Ministry of External Affairs held a press conference where they said, and I'm quoting them, Poland has emerged as a key partner for India in Europe, particularly in the context of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi's visit to Poland will focus on strengthening our bilateral ties, with a particular emphasis on defense cooperation, trade and energy security. India also recognizes the critical role that Poland has played in supporting Ukraine during this conflict. We are committed to working with Poland to ensure that the humanitarian needs of the Ukrainian people are met. So as much as we would like to focus on the significance of the bilateral relationship, even the Indian government in its official statements has made it clear that it's not divorcing this bilateral relationship from the war that's going on next door.
Absolutely. They have, for 45 years, if you never thought of such a high-level visit to Poland and you are doing it now, so there is a certain context to it, a certain diplomatic and political context to it, and I mentioned that context to you. I think the symbolism and the importance that this visit carries is that we are trying to convey that India attaches great importance to its relationship with the countries of Europe, including Eastern Europe and Poland and Ukraine. And that we are, as part of our policy of strategic independence, we have good relations with both sides. And we are there to play a helpful role if as required. And also, I think, also acknowledge the importance of the role that Poland has played in this conflict by supporting Ukraine, by being the frontline state. It helped so many refugees, taking so many refugees from there. It's going to play even more important role now, in the economic reconstruction of Ukraine, because it is a frontline state. So I think on the whole, I still think that all those three contexts that I mentioned to you, messaging the importance of the peaceful end to this conflict, peaceful negotiations, India's participation in the economic reconstruction of Ukraine, and of course the bilateral aspects, bilateral relationship with both Poland and Ukraine. These are extremely important.
Extremely important indeed. As was mentioned earlier, geopolitics really seems to be driving, our foreign policy and relationships between most countries these days. Let me take this back to Professor Bawa. Professor Bawa, a lot has been said about how almost 2.5 years into the Russia-Ukraine conflict, there's a war fatigue that has set in around the globe. The United States seem to be tired of it. Europe seems to be tired of it. Neighboring Poland certainly seems to be tired of it, also bearing the brunt of it in many ways, as is in fact the rest of the world. But we still don't see any resolution in sight. Now the question is, Prime Minister Modi has, as you mentioned, maintained from the beginning this is not an era for war, something that he told President Putin directly. Last month at the Kremlin, after that attack on a children's hospital in Kiev, he said the heart bleeds when children die. Everyone will wait eagerly to see what message Prime Minister Modi carries to Kiev this time. Because as we know, President Zelensky was very angry over Prime Minister Modi's hug with President Putin last month. But my question to you is, do you believe India is really in a position to play an honest peace broker in this conflict? Of course, there is no doubt that India is one of those few countries that, enjoys friendly ties with both parties to this conflict.
You're absolutely right. I think, India's standing and position globally, especially in the current context of the Ukraine war, is extremely unique. It's one of the few countries which can talk to both sides, given that the West has closed the door to any kind of conversation with Russia. If you were to address the issue of peace and finding a long-term peaceful, resolution, then it can all be found on the battleground. It means that the parties to the conflict would have to sit finally around the table. There was an attempt made recently in Switzerland, but one knows it did not get the kind of political mandate which would make such a process go through. Having said that, I think any effort put by any country, and I think in that sense, India's role comes into prominence given the political equation India has with both the countries which are currently at war with each other. And I think it's important to explore every opportunity, leave no stone unturned in taking forward that message. And I think it could be none better than Prime Minister Modi, who has reiterated that we have to find a different way ahead. And in that process, I do think Prime Minister will also in his discussions with President Zelensky, we are not privy to it now. The visit is still to take place. Examine what can possibly be in the future an outcome. At this point, it's too early to point out as to which direction it will go. We've just seen, an increase in the attack take place, and that do tend to happen in war when there is a lull and then there's an increase in the wartime activity. It's a kind of strategic measure. But I think to that extent, the fact that Prime Minister is going also to Ukraine, and the fact that Ukraine is receiving the Prime Minister, is a message itself. It's a message that they also recognize that India pursues a foreign policy in which it has to prioritize its own relations and interest, and its own interest of its own people first, right? Every country has to do that. and every prime minister of every country is mandated to do that. The fact that the prime minister is going to Ukraine has to be read in a much larger context of the visit, bringing about possibilities of exploring avenues as to when, where, and how this war one day could be concluded.
All right, Professor Bava, one quick question before we wrap up this conversation. Since you do focus on, Europe, do you believe that Prime Minister Modi's visit to Poland is also an indication of India's intent that it wants to diversify its relationships in Europe, having traditionally focused on Western European countries like France and Germany? Is India now looking eastward, recognizing the growing influence of countries like Poland, not to mention the fact that we also have a significant trade and economic relationship with this country?
So let me say that India has had a very holistic relationship with different countries within the European Union, a very different set of engagements. For example, what you named with Germany and France, which are the two countries we have a strategic partnership with. But with Poland, as we celebrate 70 years, it tells you of the depth of the relationship, which goes back in time when Poland was a socialist country, and today is one of the fastest growing economies in the eastern part of the European Union. Strategically located, the ability to channel and bring in investment is not lost. Poland has strength in different areas within its economy, so all of that become extremely important and strategic as India expands the kind of political, economic and security relationship it is building around the globe. So it's also to be seen in the sense of taking the existing relationship and scaling it up. The fact that a visit comes after 45 years at the level of a prime minister is indicative of a political intentionality to bring a new, intention, a new design. So this is by design to scale up the partnership, or we could almost call it a strategic partnership without having been named by the government. But I think it is indicative that this is aimed now to bring in a breath of a new, fresh air in the relationship, and in the larger context of why India would also benefit from the geopolitical developments in the region to strengthen its bilateral equations with Poland.
Well, let's certainly hope that this visit, in a sense, does come as a major boost for the bilateral relationship between India and Poland. It will be interesting to see what message Prime Minister Modi has for the Polish leadership. Those talks are going to take place later. Well, on that note, Professor Bava, Professor Swaran Singh and Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, thanks so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. All right, from Poland, let's now turn our attention to the United States where, well, the presidential contest is clearly hotting up. Former US President Barack Obama and Michelle Obama energized the crowd amidst chants of "Yes, she can" at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago as Barack Obama called on Americans to elect Kamala Harris as the next president. Obama brought the crowd to their feet when he described Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz as leaders who would care about the working class. He said, "We have a chance to elect someone who has spent her entire life trying to give people the same chances America gave her." Obama also paid a rich tribute to his friend, President Joe Biden. He said, "History will remember Joe Biden as an outstanding president who defended democracy at a moment of great danger. I'm proud to call him my president and even prouder to call him my friend." Former First Lady Michelle Obama too electrified the room when, while referring to Kamala Harris, she said, "Hope is making a comeback." Michelle also ripped into Harris's opponent and Republican Party presidential nominee, Donald Trump.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle delivered a 1-2 punch at the Democratic National Convention on Tuesday night. America's first black president has thrown his considerable political clout behind Kamala Harris, a longtime Democratic ally, in the month since she launched her 11th hour presidential bid. He continued to sing her praises to a roaring crowd in Chicago.
America's ready for a new chapter. America's ready for a better story. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
After taking President Joe Biden's place on the Democratic ticket in July, Harris is seeking to make history herself in November as the first woman and first Black and South Asian person to be elected U.S. president. Obama also took aim at his successor in the White House, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. We do not need 4 more years of bluster and bumbling and chaos. We have seen that movie before, and we all know that the sequel is usually worse.
Barack was introduced on stage by his wife Michelle, who topped Democrats' wish list as a future president in a Reuters Ipsos poll earlier this summer. She pulled no punches either when speaking of Trump, who launched his political career through racist attacks on her husband's citizenship status and has used similar attacks on Harris.
Doubling down on ugly, misogynistic, racist lies as a substitute for real ideas and solutions that will actually make people's lives better.
She also hit back at a remark Trump used on the campaign trail, saying migrants crossing into the U.S. were taking away, quote, Black jobs.
Who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
The night was also punctuated by speeches from Republicans who have left the fold since Trump's takeover of their party, including Trump's former White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham and Republican Mayor John Giles of Mesa, Arizona.
John McCain's Republican Party is gone, and we don't owe a damn thing to what's been left behind.
Harris and her vice presidential pick, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, joined the convention hall virtually from a campaign rally in Milwaukee, held in the same venue as last month's Republican National Convention.
Well, an electrifying night indeed at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Barack Obama and Michelle Obama coming out in full support of Kamala Harris. Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
This was the kind of terrain that mountaineers basically climb on. You're talking of peaks of 15,000 and 16,000 feet. You have trouble breathing, the cold, the high altitude, the dizziness, the enemy staring at your face. And in some of those cases, the Pakistanis were not even expending ammunition. They were throwing rocks at the Indian soldiers. That's how close it was.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Hello and welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Let's look at the top headlines today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a 2-day visit to Poland to hold talks with his counterpart Donald Tusk and President Andrzej Duda. This is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Poland